Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. It's a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. This season is all about living the EOS life, specifically the EOS journey. Today's guest is Mel out of Denver. She didn't start there, but that's where she's at right now. Can't wait to hear more about your story, Mel. Thanks for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I appreciate you reaching out, and I love talking about the EOS journey. It's my jam, so I'm excited to dig in.
Let's dig in. So my favorite question I have to ask is, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were in elementary school, middle school, were you always an entrepreneur, or was it something completely different?
Yeah, so it's actually funny, and I've wrote about this a couple of times, and it's something that really didn't fully connect until probably a few years ago. But I always wanted to be an architect, and I spent most of my childhood. I still have all the floor plans. I used to buy design books. I put budgets together, and so that was really what I set out to do, I thought, as a child. And then I got to math, and I said, "Forget this. I don't love it at all." And I knew from an early age that there was never going to be a black and white career for me. I don't think in engineer terms, doctor terms, right? And I never knew it was going to be business. I don't think that was a big aha until I got to college. I come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad was in corporate America until he was about 30 and then wired very similar to me. I saw that journey early on, and I also saw the ups and downs that came with that, being at home. And I think I was 10 or 11 when he started that. And so I think that whether I realized it or not, that was very inspirational to me. I didn't name it then. I don't think I ever said, "Hey, I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur." I don't even know if I knew that's what he was, right? Looking back, he had his hands in a lot of things. He built businesses, he sold businesses. Now, in reflection, I think that really inspired me to get to where I got to in college, where when I had to declare a major, I was like, well, business, it's gray. It's the most I could do. I didn't know, right? I didn't have a desire to do marketing or sales or management. I just didn't know. And so I took the business track and said, when I get out of here, I will just start trying things and start raising my hand to see where it fit. And that's really what propelled most of my career forward.
And where did you go to college, and where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I grew up in Excelsior, Minnesota, so southwest suburbs of Minneapolis. And I went to school in North Dakota State. It wasn't cold enough where I lived, so I went north. Yes. Of all things, it kind of makes me chuckle because, people go, "Really?" But I loved it. It was a great college town. It was the traditional college experience, great people. They had just recently expanded their a college of business. And I actually attribute a lot of my success and where I'm at today because of the dean there. I got into their legacy program pretty early, which really propelled me forward and gave me the opportunities that I would never have had I gone there. So, I'm a big believer that everything works out the way that it should. And how you end up in the places like North Dakota State and then end up in places like San Francisco after and LA after and Denver, right? That's part of the journey. And it's not been a straight line, to say the least.
Wow. So was it your first corporate job out of school? Was it going straight to California? How'd that work?
No, I actually left and went to Colorado after college, and I ended up in Breckenridge. My parents ended up out here first. And as my youngest brother, he went to school in Fort Collins, and I hadn't found a job yet. So I actually was a waitress at the Hilton in Breckenridge for about 4 months. And I said, "I've had it. I'm never coming back to Colorado. I don't like it." I moved back to Minnesota and moved in with some family friends and really did some soul searching on, okay, if Minneapolis is where I want to be. And I got hooked into the ad agency world, and I was set to go into that world. I had a job offer, I had a start date, and I got a phone call from one of our family friends. Said, "I'd really like you to have lunch with this woman. I think this job is right up your alley." They're kind of looking for somebody to wear multiple hats. For me, I thought, there's no way, I am way underqualified for this. And, I'll always tell people, you interview a little bit differently when you don't have anything to lose, right? So
that's right.
I got handed that opportunity, and that launched my entire career into the industry that I stayed in, and that I'm still very passionate about. And I spent quite a few years in Minneapolis on the marketing side. And with that same company, we were growing. They did not have a facilities team, a construction team, but the CEO set out to build their first freestanding commercial gallery downtown, 5,000 square feet, very high end of a studio where people can come in and make selections. It was a countertop company of all things. And I think I was 23 and we were sitting in the room and I was on the marketing team and it's like, who wants to drive this project? And I raised my hand like an idiot because I thought, how hard can it be? Real hard, but I loved it. I never, again, full circle to your architect days, I'm on site with about 60 subs and here I am. Thank goodness I'm tall and wear heels. So 6'1" gives me a little bit more of an impact at that point. But I learned a lot. And because the company had never gone through that, it really propped me up to be in a position where, hey, I figured this out. I kind of helped build the model to it. I was sitting on the job sites all the time. I was doing the budget. I was hiring the architects, the subs, the designers, and I actually got promoted and got put on the road. So I traveled all over the country to build these freestanding galleries for about 7 years. And San Francisco was my last project. So I spent about 1.5 years there and opened their gallery downtown before saying, I'm not coming back to Minneapolis. So I was living out of a suitcase in those days. So I say I lived in San Francisco. I did. I lived out of the Marriott. And at that point, I made a decision that I wasn't going to go back to Minnesota. I really liked California, and they actually ended up moving me to LA to build out their marketing team and gallery in Manhattan Beach. And that's really when I started to do more soul searching. They started to get really big and I loved wearing many hats. And it was one of those things, you got to make a decision of which direction. And I wanted to do it all still. And so that was really where we started to kind of disconnect. And in that same time, I got recruited and ended up on the tile side, jumped into sales leadership, never was a sales rep, never was a sales manager, and ended up working for an LA-based company, managing their trade division. So 75 of their freestanding gallery studios, showrooms all over the country, and doing that strategy out of their corporate office, but also kind of restructuring what that looked like from a sales team perspective in the field and internally. So I kind of got the lap in a mere 10 years. It was, I went from marketing to operations to construction management to sales leadership. And by 27, I was sitting in my leadership seat out in LA, and it was like, this is awesome. By the time I turned 30, I said, this isn't the rest of my life. If this is what it is, count me out. Right. So, and that was a really big turning point.
A couple things that I have to point out. I love that you had a start date for another job and you said, what the heck? Got nothing to lose. Why not? And that took you on a 7-year cross-country journey that for some people that were more, how do I say? I don't want to say scarcity mindset, but more like, maybe security driven, right? Less adventure driven. They're like, oh, I already have a job. I don't need to take any interviews. Like life would have been totally different. Presumably, but you took the risk. And I also love how when you were growing up, you knew you wanted to be an architect, but you ended up in architecture, like hiring, managing, and doing all of the things, all of the hats that didn't require as much math and calculus and engineering and doctor type skills, but it required your skills, which were unique and broad in general. Yeah. And it opened probably a lot of doors, some to Marriott's and Hilton's, some to, different states and locations. Which is just a cool story of just taking the road less traveled and then road very traveled by the time you're done with your 20s. Yes. So when you got to 30 and you're sitting in the leadership seat and you said, all right, it's been a good run, but I'm not going to be in my 20s forever.
Yeah, I said, okay, well, my 20s are done, right? So, I was living in Redondo Beach and I was still on the road. I mean, I think that was sort of, I was traveling a lot doing gallery builds, but I'd be put down in one location. When I got into sales leadership, I was in the air, managing, I had 32 showrooms that I would travel to just because those were my teams that I was managing outside of the strategy of just nationally helping support that. And I think in 2019, I did 146 flights that year, which means you're in the air every other day, right? And so it's not like you're in one spot. You're moving and shaking. And I was never home. I was like, hey, I had a place on the ocean, and I think I saw it maybe once every 3-4 weeks.
Shoot.
I had put everything into my career, and so I didn't have any balance. I had friends, but they were all over in different cities. Most of my friends are from the Midwest. They were on their third kid and they were married. And, it was one of those things that I either had to choose to wake up and start figuring out, this is either going to be your life and you can make all the money you want and you can keep climbing, and you're going to wake up and you're going to be 40 and you're going to have nothing. Right. And I was very fortunate, I think, to go through that as young as I was, because I now am in a room and I've done a lot of coaching with leadership, they're 50, 60, and they're having those epiphanies of like, oh my gosh, I'm looking backwards going, I have so many regrets. And, I started to feel, I tell people like Sybil, right? Like I had my work life, my personal life, and my personal life, I feel is sort of unraveling. And I think my career was always a really big reason, because it made me not deal with anything going on in my personal life. And that's honest, right? It took me a while. Sure. And I started to do my own work and got a therapist, got a coach, got, all the things. And that really started to prop me up for what was next. And in the year that I turned 30, I had a lot of epiphanies of what is next? What does that look like? I really had no idea. Because I wasn't busy enough, I went and started to poke around. I got my coaching certification. I got really into the hypnosis side of things, and I actually got my practitioner license in rapid transformational therapy. So I started to do that work with executives, just repatterning beliefs. So a lot of the same things that I was dealing with of, I don't want to get to this place, I was helping people unwind because they were already at that place. So it gave me a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. I like how also you're in sales leadership and you said you were not a sales producer, but I think one of the main things for right people, right seats problems that people have is they might choose a sales leader as someone who's a great individual producer. And it's like totally different role. And I think whoever decided, hey, we're going to bet on Mel as a sales leader probably made a good call because they didn't make that same trap. And then interestingly enough, hypnosis, like you want to talk about a sales hack.
Yeah.
You will buy this thing.
Yes.
No, don't use your powers for evil, right? I'm not saying you did, but it's just like when you think about outside of the box thinking and decision-making patterns, which I think just proves that you have a lot of flexibility, right? Because again, at 30 years old to have that much clarity, it's probably a rarity at that age, like for maturity and wisdom. And the fact that you took that essentially, that time period to make a long extended clarity break and recalibrate and reassess, kind of reset your 10-year, right? Because you started all this in your early 20s. And I think, one last comment about that is when you don't have a 10-year BHAG goal and you don't have, it's really hard to figure out like where you're going and make decisions. And I think that's part of what you were probably doing is what should it be? Like, who do I want to be? And I think one of the most sad things is if people set their goal too low, like if you would have said, I'm just going to work at this ad agency, I already got the job. Like, then it's hard to reset another BHAG goal and get excited and keep growing. So those are my thoughts on the journey thus far.
We call that staying the status quo, right? And I do not do that well. And it is a blessing and a curse. And that is the entrepreneur in me all the way. And again, I think that's when that word started to really have a lot of meaning of like, what is wrong with me? Like, can I just sit still in something and just, go to a market, not travel, just go to a job, check in, check out. And I really wanted to be that person. I really did. It felt unnormal because I'm watching everybody around me going, they all go to work, they go in at 8, they're done at 5, they have lives, they date, they have friends that are concrete, they have families. And I just couldn't get myself to do it. I was in an office for all of, a year and it was miserable for me. And so, for people listening that are entrepreneurs, they resonate with that because I don't think any of us as entrepreneurs feel normal. It feels unnatural. Like, well, we don't really fit any mold and there's no script for us. Right. Like, and that was really lonely because I hadn't yet started to really enter into circles with entrepreneurs and have that conversation. And, we always say entrepreneurship is one of the loneliest journeys. You got to be able to connect with other people because, it, you're flying solo, and it can be really challenging and kind of self crippling in a way if you don't find the community that is the norm for, I would say, us type of people, right? We're just wired differently. And again, I think that was just one of the ahas of things that I started to really understand as I was exiting or getting ready to exit my corporate career.
Talking about connection, one person that I think will and should listen to this, breaking the fourth wall, speaking directly to, she's now a neighbor of mine and a good friend. Her name is Nell Tice. So
Okay.
Nell, she had a career where when she was growing up, always wanted to be a meteorologist, like a weather person, right?
Yeah.
So great. And she then ended up in corporate and was like C-suite of a decent sized organization. And sort of like what you were saying, had that clarity where it's like, oh my gosh, this is lonely. Like I can't do this. Like what does this look like years afterwards? Started her own business, and now she does like podcasting and media and YouTube coaching for others, and travels all around the world. And the thing that she always said to me was, I can either keep doing what I'm doing as someone else, or I can do something else as myself.
Yeah.
And I think that your story reminds me just of a little bit of her. So I hope that she listens to this and it resonates as well. But now I want to hear what was the next chapter. So you now have
How did it end to start?
Yeah, like you have the coaching, you're the hypnotist, like you have the new vision. What's the next step down the path of the new vision for Mel?
Yeah, so 2019, I made a move to Denver. I actually moved myself. By the way, don't do that. I really didn't run that by many people. I just sort of up and moved because no one knew where I was anyways, right? And I loved my boss who I worked for, but it's like hindsight, you probably shouldn't do that, right? Like Mel relocated, didn't even know that. So, but my family was in Denver. My sister ended up here because she met her husband in California. My brother never left. My parents were here. And I had said, I'm never going to Colorado. It was the last place I wanted to be. But I really was like, I don't have it in me to go back to Minnesota. So let's just try it. I was still traveling. And then, as we all know, 2020 was approaching. So I went to Minneapolis and I was sort of, stirring the soul pot, if you will, still of, it's just, I really need to do something different, but I had no idea what. And actually, my uncle has a really good entrepreneurial buddy that he's grown up with all of his life. And, I'm a connector. So I'll talk to anybody. I'm like, can you get coffee? Can we grab a drink? Can we get dinner? I just want to learn from people and be a sponge. And he was the one at the end of our 2-hour meeting. I went out to the lake and had coffee with him. And he came down with traction in his hand at the end. He said, you need to read this book.
Whoa.
And at that point, it didn't even click because I didn't read it until a few months later. And enter the first week of COVID, I get the call of, Mel, we're pulling everybody off the road for 2 weeks. And my thought is, what the heck am I supposed to do for 2 weeks? I haven't been off the road in over a decade. I won't know what to do with myself for 2 weeks. Like, okay. And I sort of panicked. But it actually, between all the chaos and managing teams, because it was truly the most chaotic and disheartening thing to manage through COVID. I managed teams for 9 months. We played roulette with people's jobs every day. It was everything that, no one had the script. But at night, it was sort of when I get to a place of, okay, now this feels really heavy and like, this is crazy. I need to really use this time to figure out what's next. Like, this is sort of my gift. I read Traction, I fell in love with the simplicity of it. I went, holy smokes, where has this been all my career? Because it would have changed the game of just using some of the tools with my teams. And then I think it was probably April or May. And I said, I'm not going past one more birthday in this job. I had no plan. And
how did it work? This was during COVID, right?
Yeah. So everyone's losing their job, and I'm going, I'm not coming. October's coming, and I don't care if I know what to do or not. And
did you still have to travel, or were you locked in?
No,
or?
And so that's really also then, I think, like the 8th week of not traveling, Then I really started to
Mm.
be like, I don't think I can go back on the road, because I figured out, like, one, I think a lot of us did. We don't need to be on the road the way that we used to put the road where it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. You can be productive. And I think a lot of us figured that out. And I had a lot of colleagues that that ended up leaving too, because of, again, COVID woke a lot of people up to things.
Yeah.
And so I kept plugging away and managed my teams. And the night before I think it was my 31st birthday, I picked up the phone at 9 p.m. and I resigned. And they said, I remember my boss goes, Mel, like, can we talk about this? I said, no, we can't. I've made up my mind. If I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it in my life. And I got nothing to lose. And I quit. And in hindsight, had I known COVID was going to keep going, I probably wouldn't have done that. And so I
But
went.
it might have been better that you didn't know the future. Because you made a promise to yourself, right? That you're not going to turn 31 and do this. And you waited. It's a great motivator when you have
2
those
hours
promises.
before. I was like, hey, I'm on the clock, but I met the deadline. So.
Hey, you got your rock done before the quarter, okay? It counts. You get your star.
I'm a true visionary in typical fashion, getting right down to the wire. And yeah, so I did it. And then I went and sat on the empty beaches of the Marriotts and did some soul searching for a few months. I was coaching some executives on the side, still with the hypnosis model. And then I decided to start Googling EOS, and I actually found one of the head coaches lived in Denver, and we went out a couple of times, and really I started to use some of the tools with my executive clients. And EOS was going through their franchise move, which was sort of a turnoff at that point. But I met several members of the community. And then I made the decision to fly to Detroit and get my butt kicked through boot camp and got my franchise license. At that point, it took me some time to ramp up. I think any entrepreneur, we always were like, hey, we're high achievers. But flipping into your own business and my corporate hat, and Denver, it was the only state I never had teams in. Every other state. So I had no network here.
Whoa.
So I was going to lunch, coffee. I built a women's group, but it took me probably a solid year. I went broke. I ended up living in my parents' unfinished basement for 6 months, 4 months. And, I'm like, what am I doing? And I almost gave up. It was like, but then, I picked up a couple of clients, and by year 2, I had a full practice, and I met my husband. We got married this last October.
Whoa.
It's been it's a whirlwind, and I'm 4 years into it. So it's but yeah, that's why they call it the journey. And what's next, I don't know. I love what I do, but it's a journey, so I don't feel like it's gonna stay status quo, unfortunately.
Hey, I mean, I really applaud the fact that you didn't give up, right?
Yeah.
Because no, let's face it, when it gets hard is when it's like, this is maybe this is a sign to give up. But to some people, it's like, when it gets hard, maybe it's like, I should just like endure it and then see what happens if I do, because it can't always rain. And that's kind of what you did. Right. And look at life now.
Oh yeah. I love, it's the different, I've always loved what I do, but I mean, if you ask any of my clients, and I stayed mostly with construction, building materials. I do have my referral clients that, I've got government contract, I've got a city, I've got, financial clients. So it's not all in the industry, but I've kept my ties in the industry. I speak nationally, and I speak on EOS at, the big shows, the Builder Show, the Kitchen and Bath Show. So it's just been a really amazing way to, again, that thread of the architect continues to show up. But being on this side now, I tell people I do what I love every single day with people I love, and I get to say things. People pay me to say things that would have gotten me fired in the past. And there is nothing better than, I get to come in and be like, what are you doing? Like, no one's going to challenge the CEO, but he's going to pay me to do it. And that's essentially, I mean, you know how EOS works. When I'm in a session room, I mean, I'm coaching, I'm facilitating, I'm playing therapist, but I'm pushing. I'm not in there telling the team what to do. I'm challenging the heck out of them. I'm putting hard conversations on the table and knocking some heads together. And while that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, my sister goes, if I did what you did, I would have an anxiety attack every day. Yeah, not for everybody.
It's why it's another foreshadowing to why you were managing the architects and weren't the architect themselves. Right. You're like, hey, look, we have a business plan. We have a blueprint. We have a VTO. Stick to it, person.
Yeah.
It's not the MeOS, not your like operating system.
No,
It's the EOS. I
I've
love
never looked
that.
at it from that perspective. But you're right. I've done that pretty much my entire career.
Yeah, I mean, look, architecture analogy to EOS. Never thought before now, but like Gino and Co. made a blueprint. They're like, hey, if you use these tools, and here's the design, like you can make the house of your dreams, just or the
Yeah.
building of your dreams. Just happens to be your business, and like you're kind of helping tons of people do that.
Yeah. Architect your life. That's what I say. So it's become a good tagline and I have used
Architecture
it.
life.
But yeah, it's interesting how all the pieces connect. And, when you look back, it's always, hindsight. And if you would, I would have never have seen any of it coming. And you go back to that first, had I not taken that interview to enter the building materials world, had I gotten into the ad agency, nothing in my life would be the same. And I always am inspired by that because that's true to everyone's story. It takes one left turn to completely change your life trajectory. And that's why decisions are so, we need to make them. And that's why I think some people get paralyzed, is because big decisions, they make impact, but even small, the people you meet, the people you connect with. I got that meeting because it was from a dear friend who I grew up next door when I was up till age 7. They become great family friends. They're my parents' best friends. Had my parents never built that house on Vine Ridge Road in Minnesota, again, you can continue to follow that trail and go, what would your life be, right? If certain things didn't happen and then I made different decisions, and we'll never know the answer to if I would have gone down that road. And, but it's pretty cool to look back and see the ride thus far.
I had a question from a previous guest this is a few interviews ago. It said, can you think of one instance where you went into a situation without worrying about the outcome and how it positively affected your life? And I'm like, that's the story of Mel's whole journey, right there.
Roll with it, right? And I've been good at that. It's again, it comes with its blessing and a curse. But yeah, I think that it creates such a different life, and there's beauty in it and there's pain in it, but you got to take chances. And if you keep playing safe, I mean, it's cliche, but I've done enough things now that it's always hey, when you figure out not every decision is a safe decision, and that comes with your own assumptions, right? Don't put so much weight on it. And everything, I forget whose book it is, everything's figure outable, right? Like it is.
Yeah.
And wherever you go, it wouldn't have been the wrong decision, it's a different decision, right?
Absolutely. I think another thing that you make me think of is it's the old adage of like the only thing to fear is fear itself. And if you don't have fear into like that there's a right or a wrong decision, it's like just a preference of the time, then what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. And trust me, I don't want to sit here. I have a lot of fear in some parts of my life.
I want to ask you that if you do have experienced fear.
Yes, I have crippling amounts of fear just like everybody else. It shows up in probably different areas of my life. I played it a lot safer in my personal life through the years than I did in my professional life, which is, you could do 17 podcast episodes on that, but I always felt more comfortable making, we'll call them rogue decisions in my career, because I was like, well, if you screw that up, you can fix it. And I think personally for me is that felt way more heavy of, oh my gosh, what if I move to the wrong city? What if I date the wrong person? What if all those things to me felt a lot more.
Okay.
Why it took me longer, right?
Well, everything has a trade-off, right? Like you may be like, feeling one way in your corporate role and then a different way in your personal role. It's like, it's how do you balance the scales? Because I don't think anything is just like, it's like taking a Colby assessment, right?
Yeah.
There's not a perfect score. You can't be a 10, 10, 10, 10. Maybe that's a thing, but
I'd like to meet that person, because
I would be shocked.
A lot of chaos going on in their brain.
Maybe it's ChatGPT. Maybe it's an AI or something. But I think another thing about risk is sometimes the biggest risk is taking no risk. Oftentimes, and it's like, how do you measure risk? So, my question for you is, what are some of the ways that you approach decision making around what could be perceived as risk? Like how do you make some of these decisions with career, and especially help others to make decisions, right? Coaching, hypnosis, things like that.
Sure. So EOS has an ebook. If you haven't read it, it's called Just Decide. I don't know when they put it out, but I refer to it a lot when I'm coaching my teams and honestly having personal conversations. Is there's nothing more paralyzing in your life than indecision will be. And the businesses that you see successful, the leaders you see successful, is they're successful not because they're out making rogue decisions with no information, is they're making decisions and course correcting along the way, versus the companies that are waiting for perfection and 100% buy-in and the world to be okay. They're not moving, and that is the fastest way that a business will die, statistically. And you can apply that to your personal life. And it showed up for me. Oh, everything needs to be perfect. I need to have this part of my career dialed in. I need to make this much money. I need to. And at a certain point, I had to get to a place to say, there is not enough things on a checklist that I can do to make this risk. I'm either going to have to take the risk and put myself out there and be in one city and, do the normal things, quote unquote, and look how it worked. So it's the same thing that I tell my clients, just decide. And if it's the wrong decision, if something happens that we're like, we didn't see that coming, then I'll see in 90 days. And guess what? We'll course correct through IDSing. We'll figure out. But it's easier to adjust the sails than to rebuild the frickin' boat every single time, right?
I mean, when you put it that way, it really knocks the wind out of the sails for the wrong course. You're just like, whoop-de-doo, guess what? You made some progress, and it's better to make some progress even if it's the wrong way. Now you know it's the wrong way.
Well, right? And one of my most powerful sessions, and I've had this client for a couple of years, and they're pretty big. I mean, they're probably 200 million in revenue, and it was and they've come a long way with EOS, and I look at their journey. But one of the most pivotal sessions that they had it was brutal. We got stuck, and I think it was the third quarterly on the same topic. And I bring my animals in, and I had the horse ready to go because I'm like, I got 3 minutes of this, and we're done.
Don't beat the dead horse.
And so I did. I timed it for 3 minutes. I said, stop. And I looked at the integrator, and I said, make the call. And the integrator looked at me like, I said, I'm so serious right now. Make a decision. We're moving on. You've heard every single case to this, and that integrator ended up making the call. That meeting solely at the end was rated a 10 by 7 people in the room for the same reason. Thank God we just made a decision. Half of the room didn't even agree with it, but they're like, at least we're moving forward. And living in the stuck is we don't understand as leaders when we're doing that. And guess what? A confident leader can make decisions. So it's part of, I also challenge my leadership teams. How do you know you have the right leaders? Do you have people in the room that don't get paralyzed with that can, again, respectfully get the information, ask the questions, take it all, strategically make the decision and kick the output to say, hey, we're leading it forward? Because I don't know about you. I want to work for somebody and have a leader that's confident in taking charge and moving things forward versus I feel like I need to appease everybody and I don't really, and we can't do that because I'm afraid.
Like not everyone has to be confident in the vision, but the person in charge, the leader, needs to be confident in the vision or else no one's confident in the vision.
Yeah.
Right? So someone's got to be confident in the vision.
Yes. So I've seen it go down several ways, but I think that, again, that can apply to everything. You just...
Yeah.
And my dad always taught me this, and he's probably the biggest proponent of it. It's like, can you accept the worst case scenario that you just dream in your head? And if you can, because we know statistically that's probably never going to happen. Like we make things up in our mind, but if you can wrap your head around that is the worst case scenario, then can you move forward with this decision? And I always hated when he said that growing up because I was like, and this guy, I mean, he makes me look afraid of everything, right? I'm a bowling ball in a china shop. He's like a boulder in a china shop. It's, I'm cut from the same cloth, but he always said that with a lot of confidence. And he has had to pivot a lot, and it's like, he's down, he's up, he's down, he's up. And I've always had a lot of anxiety, but respect for that. I'm similar, but there's truth to that. And I think I had to get to that place in certain points of like, can I accept the worst case scenario. Yeah, living in my parents' basement was probably worst case scenario. But had I not done that, and had I not gone through that season, and had that been part of the plan that I saw coming, I wouldn't have done it. But I could accept it. It's like, all right, it's like, it's sort of a funny part of your journey. It's a humbling part of my journey. I didn't go straight up in a straight line. I still don't have this all figured out. There's pivots that are going to come. I'm not close to being at the end of my career. And because my careers look the way that it does, I would be foolish to sit on this podcast and tell people like I've landed the plane and I'm done. Like I think
Mel has it all figured out. Said not her. Said not her ever.
Call me. I don't. I promise you. I'm in a different season. I'm newly married. We have a house. The normal things, right? I'm Benjamin Buttoning. I tell people I do everything backwards. So it's. I'm figuring out all of those things alongside of, what is next for business and how do I continue to pour into this, because EOS is never going away for me. I mean, I love it way too much and I have a complete passion. It works. It's stupid simple and I'm a straight shooter. So it kind of matches the energy that I have with that. And we'll see what happens.
I have to ask the question. You mentioned your dad a couple of times and you said he's an entrepreneur and that was one of the ways that you kind of got to see what it was like growing up. And first I'll share a story and I'll ask my question. So I grew up with an entrepreneur father and grandfather as well. I got to see it firsthand, the highs and the lows, right?
Yep.
Like you get the whole picture living in the same house. And I remember one time I was a high school and then college athlete. I was a wrestler. You can't see, the ears are nasty and I'm pretty short. So it worked out. And my dad always says, whatever you do, don't work in the family business. Don't do what I do. Get a stable job, be an accountant or a teacher, get a salary. And everyone would say that I was just like him. We were really similar. And he described it as feast or famine. And meanwhile, I'm in wrestling where my weight's yo-yoing by like double-digit percentages all the time. And you're saying, oh, don't do feast or famine. Well, I'm currently pursuing the thing I enjoy the most, which is feast or famine. Like that's like saying, don't be who you are.
Right.
And I get that because as a parent now, you're trying to don't do as I do as I say, because I don't want you to feel harm or safety. But like if you're wired like us, like I would say you and I, my father, your father, it's like you tell me to play it safe, I'm not going to listen. So why even waste your breath? Yeah. So my question for you is, how much in the People Analyzer tool, the GWC, do you think it really is genetic that I'm obviously my father's child?
Oh, I think it's a lot genetic. I think that the neurons are different in our brains. And I wish I could remember the book. Gino gave it to us up in a keynote a couple of years ago, and I don't remember the title. But it was really all about how entrepreneurs are wired and where that comes from. And yes, a lot of it's DNA, a lot of it is genetic, but there's lots of studies that show, certain things that people have been diagnosed with, whether it's ADHD or, this all aligns with entrepreneurship. It's just a different word to call a bunch of people that are, again, can't fit in a bucket. There's no way we fit in one area. But knowing my dad, and I am a split 50-50 of my parents. And so my dad, if there was a 15 quick start, he would be it.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm a 9, so I can tolerate and I'll play. But if he had ever told me, don't follow in my footsteps, one, that would have challenged me to follow it faster, right? Because I'm the person that's like, oh, you tell me what to do, right? And that was very much my, I really...
Because if you had done the same to him, he would have,
Yeah, no. And he never discouraged. I mean, he's still through his ups and downs and watching it, and that's been really challenging. But I also think what it's done is it's equipped me with a different safety net and perspective to go, where did I see when the lows were going on? And that creates fear. But I think it makes me set myself up a little bit differently. Because I'm a risk taker, but I also don't have a tolerance to live in my parents' unfinished basement all the time, up and down. That's a
different kind of hell,
right? It's sort of like, hey, you know what? I can go through that once or twice, but after that, no thanks. I'm not prepared to take the type of risk that's going to knock me out. And and so I think everyone's got a different tolerance. And I think Colby, I don't know what you are in Colby, but I'm a 4492. My risk tolerance is very high. I married a 1 quick start. I am a 9 quick start. So you can,
Yeah,
yeah,
give
your
me.
eyes, your
I
eyes.
I need this. This is what I need selfishly. At 41 minutes in the podcast, I am a seven. I think it's 7.381, something like that. So high fact finder is a big difference between you and I, but other than that, it's kind of
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
And I work with a 1 quick start. And I'm just like, how do I communicate with you better so it doesn't come across as me being impatient or pushy or maybe annoyed? And, but we worked together on a project recently, and the outcome the client loved, like 10 out of 10 loved. But everything up until the outcome was like tension and pain and like just resisting forces. Now, I don't know if that's all Colby, but it felt like it because it's just how we're wired to do stuff. So give me your insight on this.
Well, if my husband was home, I tell him to come in and I just give him the screen and he could say, this is how, because again, it shows up in personal relationships too. And I think it's self-awareness. Colby for me was when I learned it, it's just, you can't change how people are wired and make decisions. And, I tell people Colby is not about how smart you are. It's not an IQ test. It's not an aptitude test. It's truly like, how do you make decisions? Like your mode of operation, you can't change it. So you got to own it, which means you can't change how other people, as much as it drives me crazy sometimes, because I'm fast, I'll go. It's like, I'm 7 miles down the road and I'll clean up the carnage that I just ran over later, where that one is going, especially if they're paired high fact finder, tons of information. Whoa, we need to stabilize. And so I think it's just acknowledging that. And when I have that difference going on in a session room, it's calling it out. You guys make decisions differently.
Awareness, right?
It's, and we get the awareness on the table. And then I'm very hopeful if I can have somebody in a room that's in the middle of the road, right? Our facilitators, give me the 4s and the 5s on the quick start, because they're a really good, the same as I'm in my fact finding, I'm a 4. So I don't really have a strong pull. But those people are very powerful when you're amongst team members that are so different on those scales, but you got to call it out and you can't change it. And it can be the most frustrating thing. And by the way, I would tell you that being a high quick start, we're probably more frustrating to deal with if you pooled.
I would 100% agree. My wife would agree. Because
it's like people interpret it as, well, Ross is going to just run me over. And you're going, I'm not trying to run you over. I'm trying to get there faster. And I can see this vision and I don't need all this jargon in order to make a decision. Right? These are positive things that come from a leader.
I need some jargon, but not that much.
Right. But then there's an argument to having a stabilizer in your world.
I know.
It really does create a balance of, it's why I can't work with a team if I got a bunch of high quick starts and no low, because we dream and we talk and we have all these plans. And then it's like, okay, well, let's not borrow all this trouble right now. Like, what can we use to anchor us down to something that's working? Right. Those are your stabilizers. They look at things like, okay, what can we keep consistent, even if we're going to look at what we're doing next? And I think if you can look at it from that perspective and who the people are, whether it's, you and your wife having a conversation, my husband and I having a conversation, I'm in a session room and I got a visionary and integrator that are on different sides of the map, is they're both strengths. They truly are. And it just takes a different type of communication. And honestly, my husband's going to watch this because I'm going to say you have to, just based on what this description is like. Yeah, you just described half my day with Mel sometimes of like, I'm not trying to make a point. I'm just trying, it's like I see.
Hey, I think the opposite of love is indifference. And I think that is like the crux of what trust and Patrick Lencioni, his whole pyramid experience is. Like, hey, if you don't care, I don't trust you because, I'm more likely to have obnoxious aggression radical candor every single time. Yep. Right. I care and I'm going to confront you. But like, that's where I live. I live in that box, and not everyone does. And I think it's how do we express empathy and the positive, nurturing emotion, energy with like, not being discouraging, like to encourage and bring it out of other people in their own way.
Yeah.
I wish I could solve that problem. And if anyone knows it, Mel, maybe maybe it's hypnosis. Maybe I need to learn how to do hypnosis. That could be it.
Yeah, hypnosis can solve a lot of things. I'm telling you, it's good stuff. Your subconscious does a lot of crazy stuff with you.
Let me ask you a question about hypnosis then. So What are some of the things you've learned about that, and how has it really drastically affected like how you do EOS, how you do business, how you do life? Like, I'm not super familiar with that whole field of study, so I'm really curious to like see the secondary effects of what you've learned.
Sure. So, full disclosure, I do not hypnotize my EOS clients, and I cannot make you quack like a duck, and I cannot. All the stage things you see is not really hypnosis. It is, but it's not when you think of what I do. So I have to set that record straight, right? And if you would have ever told me I could hypnotize people, I would have laughed at you and been like, "That's just crazy," because it's like the woo woo stuff. But it's part of when I started to go to therapy and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
The modalities, like, I'm a very big believer in people should have their support team, right? Like, go to therapy, go to counseling, get a coach, like all these things. And I think it makes you a much stronger person. But there's all these different things. And, talking is one thing, but, how I did most of my work was doing the subconscious work a lot around the belief repatterning, right? Where
Mm.
that's where most of our stuff is held. And so while you can talk about a lot of things, and yes, it's impactful, if we don't remove old belief systems and figure out where they're coming from and replant them, keyword, replant something that's a different belief, right? Because if we think of it, if you rip out a plant and you don't put something back in, well, it just fills in, right? So we've got to figure out what's the crux going on. We've got to rip that belief out, figure out where it's coming from, and then we've got to rewire your subconscious to a different pattern. So if my belief is I'm not enough, okay, well that's one of the most common beliefs out there. It stems
Sure.
from a lot of things. Your childhood is a huge, huge, huge factor in how you show up as an adult. And a lot of people don't. And like 90% of your belief systems are formed before the age of 7. Now people go, holy smokes. But if you look at your childhood, and that's a lot of stuff that happens. You see parents, you have siblings, moving, things happen at school, right? So it's like you're hardwired already, and then that compounds. And then we wonder why, as adults, people start showing up and their messes seem to get larger. It's because we're not doing that work. So I had done a lot of work prior, and hypnosis was just another way for me to access some of those a lot of inner child work, doing the deep healing, rewiring to figure out like why behaviors, why certain patterns are coming up. So I do use the modalities in the EOS world, and that's just part of the coaching technique. And
Right.
I have
But
to
it's
say,
more about restructuring, reshaping, or replanting. I never thought of replanting beliefs, right? That's like the crux of it.
yeah,
And like what you said earlier within the session room, where it's like issue on the board 3 quarters in a row, make a decision. Like we have to replant this one way or the other. And also, like, how do you solve an issue if you don't identify it first, like the root cause? And not just about EOS, but I think one phrase that you're making me think of is it's not the beliefs we hold or don't hold. It's the ones that we believe in that simply aren't true, right? It's the limiting beliefs that are our biggest obstacles.
and then that's across the board. And so it's given me the ability, you see people out and about, right? And you see grouchy people, you see people that are angry, you see people, and man, it's given me a whole different perspective on, you don't judge people, because be kind to people, because that is, people don't just wake up and be angry when they turn 50, right? Like that has taken a lot of things to transpire. And most of the time, a lot of work that has never been done, and a lot of things that have been buried. And it's not easy work. So, I tell people it's the same with the US. It was a good translator to your point. We're going to the core of the issue, and I'm not going to stay on the surface with you. You want to drill down, you want to figure out how to fix this. I'm not a Band-Aid person, right? I believe in the holistic of a lot of, whether that's medical, food, things of that nature, that's going to go and support, right, our health. And mental health is a real thing, and it drives a lot of things. So yeah, you can go, and again, I say this with a lot of respect, because I think there's a time and a place for medicine, but it's like, what do we do in most of our time? We throw a drug at it. We put a Band-Aid on it. We never really figure out.
We just manage symptoms versus treating causes, right?
And that shows up everywhere. And so if you can get in a lot of my one-on-one coaching with Visionary Integrator, personal stuff does come up. We get to some of, I get really curious when I hear certain things. And again, that's the coach in me of what's driving that. Tell me more about that comment. And I can help them sort of peel back that layer. I want to be clear, I don't play therapist to that level with them. I have
Sure.
had a lot of referral, like I have had to say, hey, I think it's time you need to step into therapy, but I can help coach through some belief work that I'm seeing presented, and just hold space in it for my clients of when they're dealing with certain things and getting a little bit more curious, that ends up being below the surface a lot more than I think most people are willing to go. And that is directly because I've done that work myself.
So the experience helps you with your EOS Implementer hat, but you're not trying to be like their therapist. You're like, I can recommend you,
Yeah.
Delegate and elevate somebody else for that.
Well, and I think that it sort of goes hand in hand. Like when you hire a coach, it's like, ask the coach the question, like, what have they done on their journey? Have you ever had a coach? And don't hire a coach that's never had a coach. Like that blows my mind. There's coaches out there, and there's a lot of great coaches out there, but there's a lot of people. It's like, I will never ask my clients go to places that I have not gone myself or I'm willing to go. Right. And I think that's the difference of like a lot of what propels us in life is our real world experience. It is our biggest gift. And a lot of people, whether that comes through pain or joy, but experience shapes us, it molds us, it gives us wisdom, it gives us perspective. I couldn't have done this 15 years ago. And I've grown a tremendous, just from the knowledge I've learned in the session room and with personal relationships, professional relationships, really understanding the mentality of leaders has taught me everything.
I'm dying to ask you this question. This is like not about the career journey, the life journey of Mel, but what is one belief you had in your 20s that you had to replant in your 30s?
I am not enough, that I need to perform to be loved. And I work on that still every day. I think a big reason I was successful at my career is my self-worth came from that. And it was one place in my life I could figure out. I wasn't great at it. I wasn't the top academic student. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't, it was like, I didn't really have anything. And when I started to become really great early on in my career, I got the accolades. And I think that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I've talked about that on other podcasts of, and where my self-worth came from is if I can be successful. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we have this as I get out and talk to more people, is what does success look like? And why are you chasing this dream, right? What reason is it for? And so I'm not enough. Where do I hold my self-worth? How do I get that?
Like self-esteem type things and derivations.
Yeah, and look, if someone tells you that work is done, I don't think that work's ever done in anybody, because
no, it shouldn't be, because it's a journey, right? Isn't it a journey?
Rip out, replant, rip out.
You don't just like arrive at self-esteem. I'm here, I'm here to stay.
And be careful of the people that come into the room looking like they have most of it, because they're the ones that don't. And this is when you can start to understand and equip. Egos are driven by insecurities,
like self-preservation almost.
Yes,
like they're defending something.
And we all know the people that are like the cocky people that talk about themselves all the time, like and I just want to hug those people, because there's something very fundamentally broken internally they're trying to compensate for, right? And I did that early on in my career, and it still shows up, trust me. And it's something I have
to work on it.
Yeah, I have to work on it all the time to be like, okay, why am I doing this? Who's this for? My husband's great at challenging. It's like, don't make this for me, Mel. It's like, you're making that decision for you. So stop making the excuse of, I need to do X. I need to keep pushing myself this, because at a certain point, it's not for anybody but you or your ego, or you're trying. And so that check balance, to have that with everybody in your life and surround yourself. I have a great group of women in Denver. I have a group called Unsubscribe, and I started, and there's about 60 entrepreneurial leaders. And it's just all women that have been extremely successful. And so we hold a lot of the same belief systems. We've gone through a lot of the same things. People are on different paths. But you just need to continue to challenge yourself and the people that you love. It's like, there's always going to be work to be done. It's, can you name it? Can you acknowledge it? Can you lean into it? Because that, in my opinion, what has enabled me to show up in different ways of my life and grow. I still have a long way to go. So hear me loud and clear.
Gap in the gain, though, Dan Sullivan. I think when you look at where you want to be, it's always daunting. It's so far away. But then you can always look back and say, you flew for half of a year, and the amount of miles you traveled is a very big distance in just 1 year. So you've gone a very far distance in a short time.
Yeah. It's been a fun ride.
So I'm going to ask you, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and honestly, easily could talk to you for way longer. I want to be conscious of your time.
Sure.
The last guest had a question for you, not knowing who you'd be, what you'd be about. And they asked, what is one thing in the next 48 hours that you're going to do to make a difference in someone else's life and take the spotlight off of you?
Oh, I wish I was asked this question yesterday. I did it last night.
You
Geez,
can pretend it's yesterday.
48 hours. No, I think I just got together with 3 women that it was more of the honesty huddle, I'll call it, where we kind of all show up and dump our stuff. And it's less about, and it's more challenging for us, so we can push each other into sort of this discomfort place of kind of owning our own stuff and being seen and feeling okay asking for help. I think I'm on a mission to make sure people can show up and ask for help. This whole, I have to have it all figured out and I have to present that way. And I see it across the board. I see it with people I'm related to. I see it with friends. I see it with leaders. And I think just continuously reaching out and being a person that can hold space and that people know that that's true and that they trust enough to show up as you, I'll show up as me, and we'll figure it out, right? No judgment, no ego. And if that does show up, then you challenge me on it, I'll challenge you on it, right? And that was a big part of that conversation yesterday too. And I have no intention of ever stopping that. I think that's just baked into my DNA and my daily of what I'm out trying to help people and be honest and blunt. And then if they like that, then they can come back for more. And I need it in my life too. And I think asking and not being the fixer all the time there's a lot to be said about that as well. Because I played that role for a really long time in my life too.
What question do you have that you want to ask the next person I interview?
Yeah, I'm going to steal this from one of my good friends, Shannon, because I love it. She asks this to people in public all the time, and we get into great conversations. What's your superpower? That's my question. And I'd love to know, Ross, what's your superpower?
What's my superpower? Honestly, it depends on who you ask. But if you ask probably my dad, he'd probably say that I have an incredibly high tolerance for pain and an incredibly long runway for loyalty. And if you ask my wife, it's that I care more than anyone she's ever met. Which to some people is like, I can't believe that. But it's like, well, maybe you just got to let me take down this exoskeleton and I'm a big teddy bear.
Yeah.
That might be those 2 close people that know me pretty well's answer.
Good for you.
What I think my answer is, sometimes it's not accurate.
Hey, I'm telling you, it's a fun conversation starter because it really challenges people to think and pause and go. Because again, we don't often want to answer something positive about ourselves. And most people do what you just did. Well, other people would say, well, no, I'm curious. What do you think your superpower is? It will help people out, but it's created a lot of great
honestly, I'll say what I think my own superpower is, because you're holding me accountable, which I appreciate. I think my superpower is that when I set my mind to something, like I truly believe that someone has to kill me in order to stop me. Like I am doggedly determined when I am determined.
We call that the train on the tracks.
Yeah.
And once it's going, it's not stopping.
I think that's what I would say my own superpowers. Now, I wanna be conscious and end this. Shoot, this sucks. I would love to talk with you again sometime, Mel. It's been an absolute pleasure. For everyone listening, specifically to Nell Tice, my friend, and Mel's husband, I hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. You've learned some things about us. You learned some things about life, liberty, pursuit of property, and maybe yourself in relation to us and to one another. That's what it's all about, is getting the best out of everybody else, replanting beliefs that don't really serve you, and putting the ones that do in their stead. My only ask is that if you enjoyed it, share it with a friend. Thank you, Mel. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it.